Hello again and welcome to another edition of Forum for a Better Understanding. For our 360th program, I couldn't think of a better topic than to look back 50 years ago this week on October 11th, 1962, the opening of the Second Vatican Council. Since it's Forum for a Better Understanding, we didn't want to just have Catholic faithful sharing about why we think it's a good thing, but rather have an interfaith panel share perhaps personal reflections, things of their growing up, sharing about their faith, how it's been enlightened by anything after the council that we have shared with them, that they've shared with us. So we have a very interesting panel to share back with us their own feelings about what the Catholic Church has become since the Vatican Council. To my left is our good friend, Father Arshen Aivazian, who is the pastor of St. Paul Armenian Orthodox Church and also actually a member of the KNXT Board of Directors, which is an awesome thing, and I'll let Father Arshen tell you more about that. In the middle of our group is the rabbi at Temple Beth Israel, Rabbi Rick Winer. Been here since July of last year. We're so glad that he's here, has been on many forum programs. He'll share from his own experience as a Jewish leader what the council means to him. And finally, directly across from me is the Reverend Dr. Norman Broadbent, who's been on many forums, has shared on many different topics. He is the minister at the First Congregational Church of Fresno, known as the Big Red. We're so glad to have this very interesting panel from actually 3 different perspectives. In fact, 3 of the documents in this book of the 16 would make a connection with them because it's about them. The council is about everybody, but it's also about particular communities of faith. So let's begin with my opening thought. Father Arshen, could you begin, and then Rabbi, and then Norman, could you share a little bit about your own faith, your community of faith, and maybe something going on in your faith community at this moment that you might like to share with our viewing public? You're up, Arshen.
Well, not much is going on, different than what it was last week, the week before. However, a faith journey always is prepared for the unexpected. So we don't know in this journey of life what we're going to encounter tomorrow. And like every other faith community, my community also looks at Scripture and tries to prepare for tomorrow. But on today's topic, I think it is important to realize that Vatican II was such a historic event that really impacted the entire faith communities of the world, Christian and non-Christian. It had different impacts on the Orthodox, on even Protestant communities, and beyond that, even non-Christian communities, interfaith-wise. One thing that I remember a few years ago with John Paul II, there was that international interfaith prayer where Hindu and Muslim and Jewish and Orthodox and Protestant all got together, which would have been unthinkable prior to Vatican II. Mm-hmm. So in many ways, the Vatican II is important from the perspective not only of the Catholic Church, but from non-Catholic perspective, the Vatican II opened the Catholic Church to the world, but in a real sense, opened the Catholic Church to itself.
Oh, exactly. In and out. It was...
Exactly.
Yeah. Rabbi, could you share, because it gives you one more chance to share with us the season that you've just had. We're airing the show now in October. What is it that you might like to share with us about the beginning of the new Jewish year?
So we will have been completing the high holiday period, which is a very introspective time for us, and yet in the middle of that introspection, we also like to look to the community around us. one of the things that I'm very proud of that I've been involved in for quite a few years now is a major project that we do at this time of bringing in food to offer to those who are in need. It's a great way of taking our words and making them into deeds. It's also something that saddens me when I see weeks from now the 10,000 pounds of food that we will have brought in will be gone. And it reminds me that every day, every week is that journey that we're talking about that is something that we need to participate in. What then conversely gladdens me is each time when I gather with my interfaith colleagues and we talk about this, it energizes each of us to participate together in this work. And so as I look at the years following Vatican II and the important work that the Catholic Church has done and in some ways leads in doing, I'm very pleased to be a part of that ongoing interfaith desire to participate together in making the world a better place.
Thank you for taking your part. Norman, can you share a little bit about the Big Red, about the First Congregational Church of Fresno? It's a really historic community, a beautiful community. Tell us a little bit about being the shepherd of that church.
I just simply want to follow on my colleague here in that your opening invitation was to talk about something that our local congregations are involved with currently. And by the time this program airs, we will be having completed the 2012 Crop Walk.
Oh, yeah.
And our church is host this year to that event. And just to bring into deeper focus some of the great concern that you raised is that we are now getting the most current data for for Fresno and neighboring counties, 2 neighboring counties, that it is now estimated that 200,000 children are in homes that are not food secure. 200,000 in Fresno County, Kern County, and I believe Madera County. And so CROP, as an interfaith expression, is an opportunity for us to literally put our feet together and walk together, regardless of theological tenets or boundaries or architecture or prayers that we offer. Yeah. So this, and I think in many ways for us historically, this is a good representation of the way the particular community of faith that I serve has been present and active in the community in an interfaith and ecumenical pattern.
Exactly. And it almost reverts back to last week's program when we talked about how we're going to make this world at all a more graced place to live. It's if we do these acts of justice and acts of charity, but mostly justice. It's something that if you were here last week, you'll remember the Sikh community and the Jewish community. We're bringing that up. The Unitarian community brought that up as a commitment that we want to share together with all of us. Second round of questions is really bringing it back now to the Vatican Council, and I wonder if each of you could go back in your early memories of perhaps growing up. Let's say how far back you want to go back as far as you want, about any image that does reflect a connection with Catholicism, good or bad, a connection with the Catholic Church, with Catholics, back as far back as you can go, so we could see what changed in your lifetime. So Father Arshen, bring us back a little.
I could take the rest of the program.
You only have a
But Vatican II is etched in my memory as one of the most vivid experiences when I was growing up in Jerusalem at the time as a young seminarian. And
wow.
Our impression of the Catholic Church was more the image of a proselytizing or a rejectionist church that said either you're Catholic or you're not. There was actually no gray area in between. And when Vatican II started, actually we started seeing the face of the Catholic Church in a way that never was possible prior to that. And of course, having experienced all that in Jerusalem has the added dimension, because in the international holy places, in Holy Sepulchre, in Bethlehem, in Gethsemane, you have the Greek, the Armenian, and the Catholic communities always in tension.
Oh, yeah.
It was like on a daily basis. But believe it or not, it was right in the middle of Vatican II that I was ordained a priest in 1965. And I spent, in our tradition, there is a 40-day period of preparation before you offer your first Eucharistic liturgy.
Oh,
and I
right.
spent my 40 days in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and at night, the gates are closed. Those who are inside are inside. They have nobody but to each other to talk to. Well, suddenly I was talking with Franciscan friars. In fact, there was one I'll never forget. He was Brother Francis. He was a Franciscan friar, and he was from San Francisco. And it was such a nice coincidence. And one day he comes to me, he says, "Hey, Arshen, would you like some nice wine?" I said, "Yeah." And he actually brought me Franciscan-made wine, which really was not on the market for sale. It was just made for Franciscans. Now, I wonder whether that kind of an exchange would have been possible prior to Vatican II, which actually opened up the gates, the paths of communication and interaction. And interaction not just on the religious or ecclesiastical levels, but on human level. And I feel myself really enriched, because it was at that time that I was invited to the ordination of a couple of other Franciscan friars. I was a young priest at the time, and one of them had an Armenian grandmother, and you know, wonderful experiences. And I think people do not realize the impact of Vatican II on the wider ecclesiastical church life. It is only now that we are becoming more and more aware of the impact of Vatican II on ecumenical interfaith, and I think it is very important to realize the impact of Vatican II on internationally now wide open issues of social justice, civil rights, political realities, and so on. Vatican II made all that possible.
I hope you're all listening to what Father Arshen said, because it's coming from his own personal experience, 46 years ago ordained in Jerusalem, which brings up Rabbi, who has a distinct connection to Jerusalem, except he's going to have to hold it, believe it or not, till we come back after the break. Rabbi will begin by sharing his own earliest recollection of a connection with our church and with our community.
KNXT thanks all its loyal viewers and respected businesses who have supported your Catholic television station. Now you can support KNXT with program underwriting by having your name, your company's name, or organization associated with your favorite program. Detailed information about you or your company will appear before and after each program or day part you select. Keep the quality and spiritual message alive and make a difference. Call 559-488-7440 today, or go online at knxt.tv to find out more about program underwriting on KNXT.
Welcome back to the second half of our program on the impact of the Vatican Council on interfaith relations. We've heard very beautifully expressed the impact that Father Arshen, who represents for us the Armenian Orthodox community today, how the powerful and very positive impact when he was a priest, 1965. Rabbi, how far back can you bring us to where, as a young boy, you met a Catholic man or something.
I don't go back quite as far, but your descriptions of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre really rang for me because the years that I lived in Jerusalem, and each time I go there, it's one of my favorite places to go. And having observed and studied about it, I know that it's not the easiest place within religious politics because people argue over what area they get to clean. When you first walk into the plaza, there's a large plaza in the outside, and then there's a staircase that comes down to it. And the bottom stair is a couple inches tall, and there have been significant arguments over who gets to sweep that stair. Is it a part of the courtyard? Is it a part of the staircase, which are under two different realms? And people have terrible arguments about this. And then I hear and have experienced in my own way the stories of people coming together to share wine, or we were talking earlier about my favorite spot in Jerusalem to get Armenian pizza, which is just, what was the name for it?
Lamajun.
Lamajun, yeah, oh, wonderful. And so in the midst of all these big arguments that go on in the geopolitical sphere, we have so many wonderful moments of people just coming together and sharing beautiful moments, whether it's over food or wine, and those are the models that I like to focus on, how we can take those moments, make them bigger, and create more and more moments of bringing together. Vatican II was a great step in that, but it's the kind of thing that we cannot be complacent about. We need to continue to work on the effort of keeping it moving in the positive direction.
Norman, you have some magnificent stories of growing up in our own New England and your own family's connection to the church in very beautiful ways. Can you share any of those?
I can share a string of those there, thank you. I am, in many respects, I'm a child of Vatican II. Prior to, particularly the opening of the second phase, which was the discussion on ecumenism, there began a series of what were called living room dialogues. And my parents, both who were in ministry, my father is a pastor of a church in Brockton, Massachusetts, my mother is a sacred dance choreographer, hosted several of those, and so I got to sit on the upper steps and listen through the rungs of the railing to these conversations that took place between primarily Catholics and Protestants, but my father had a particularly close relationship with a rabbi at Temple Beth Israel in Brockton at the time, and he also and his wife were part of those conversations. By the time that I hit my junior year in high school, my very first real girlfriend, I remember I'm a PK, I'm a preacher's kid. My very first girlfriend was Marge Matiziak, a Polish Catholic. And that began a whole other level of conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But even more importantly, I think for my family, the impact of particularly that phase on ecumenism. Living in Massachusetts, my father had gotten to know then Cardinal Richard Cushing, and Dad went on to become an official in our denomination in New Hampshire. And my mother was the first non-Catholic woman invited into St. Anselm's Seminary in New Hampshire, where then she was invited to choreograph a particular liturgy, and I don't remember the event. I just simply remember that she was the first in that regard. And then later on, unfortunately and tragically in 1965, with the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, again, Richard Cardinal Cushing organized an interfaith procession from New England, and they flew together to Atlanta. And somewhere in my files, I have a photo of my father and Cardinal Cushing and one of the rabbis from Boston in that procession. So that when I say I'm a child of Vatican II, I mean this elongates in many other ways that unfold as I eventually move into ministry on my own. But your question was, go back as far as you can, so that's where I start.
Which was great. Now what I'd like all three of you to do is, in any way that you can connect theologically, or I guess for Rabbi and for Norman, even in studies, how it became different what you did as a student, you were already ordained. Tell us a little bit briefly the theological tuning towards Rome as opposed to being oblivious to Rome.
That is the area that it has impacted my life most, because when Vatican II first opened, and until the time it closed, when I was ordained towards the closing, the reforms, internal reforms the Catholic Church initiated for itself actually started a debate among other Orthodox churches about their own need to reform. And for example, even though we haven't been able, we do not have the structural efficiency, I regret to say.
The bureaucracy?
The bureaucracy, or, yeah. However, it actually started that discussion, which goes on until today, whether the liturgy should be in the classical or vernacular, and whatever other reforms, to the point where, let's say, among various Orthodox denominations, one of my professors, Alexander Schmemann, is the one who was an observer at Vatican II, and at the time, Bishop Karekin Sarkisian, who later became Catholicos of all Armenians, he was an observer, a young priest at Vatican II, and it really initiated discussion on liturgical reform, liturgical theology, of which Father Alexander Schmemann is credited to introducing it to the American theological circles. So the impact of Vatican II was not just for the Catholic Church, it had an impact on all local churches or national Orthodox churches to start a discussion within themselves. As I said, it hasn't been resolved in every way, and yet the image of the Roman Catholic Church for the non-Catholic has really been restructured by Vatican II.
Rabbi, Judaism and Catholicism have made major strides since '65. What highlight do you want to offer?
What I really appreciate is the ongoing dialogue and having it been opened up for these continued not only dialogues but really learning together. And it opened up for me in my undergraduate education, studying with scholars on early Christianity. And then when I got to the Jewish seminary, the rabbinical seminary, my teachers were a part of also the observing and ongoing dialogues with the Vatican and the Vatican Council, and shared their perspectives, both their pleasure at many of the triumphs as well as the continued challenges of our work to get to where we still need to be. And I think about their work and how each of us can take part in continuing that movement forward to better the understanding, to better the appreciation of each other, and to get us to the part which I'm most concerned about which is regardless of differences, how we work together. But I'm so pleased that it's a major part of what Catholicism is today. It makes our work much easier.
Oh, it's much better now. Norman, your life reflects a real passion for ecumenism. Share that a little.
Well, by the time that I entered seminary, which was a second career for me, Vatican II had already broken open a level of dialogue in terms of theological discussion, social justice, collaboration. So by the time that I arrived at seminary in Berkeley, I, through the Graduate Theological Union, took coursework with Don Gelpi, a Jesuit theological seminary. Some of us were invited to Friday afternoon communion, Eucharist. You know, they say, they're Jesuits and they were Berkeley Jesuits. Well, we were with the Berkeley Jesuits. One of my classmates and adjunct faculty on new liturgical design is a woman who was the lay worship leader at the Franciscan Renewal Center in Paradise Valley. And when I took my first pastoral call in Phoenix, I was invited there and welcomed into that community on Sunday evenings after I had finished all of my responsibilities, and welcomed in to be a full participant in the worship, including, again, the Eucharist. Later on, as my ministry took me to San Diego, I had the great privilege of working very carefully and closely with both with the Ecumenical Conference of San Diego, where Dennis Michelanis was the chief ecumenical officer for that diocese, and today has assumed that responsibility for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Oh my.
And again, sort of the point that I heard each of you make was let's find the common ground on which we can walk, and let's persevere and bring integrity from our traditions together to those places where those opportunities to make a difference in our community can become most obvious and apparent. So those are just a few of the. As a musician, I also have to say that Vatican II gave us all Ray Rep
To begin
with, and other wonderful musicians who have followed. But it also gave us, at least for Protestants like myself, gave us Hans Kung and a Matthew Fox and a Charles Curran and a John Dominic Crossan, Carl Rahner, all of those who we as Protestants devoured in our seminary and post-seminary reading. So that's the legacy.
Including Joseph Ratzinger.
Including Joseph Ratzinger, who was critical in that second phase. He was really critical at that point.
And on that note, noting that Cardinal Ratzinger 50 years ago would have been an influential leader at the council, we want to hope that the church moves always forward, and as they say, not backward. We want to thank you for being here today, Father Arshen, Rabbi Rick, and Norman. Till next week, God bless.